Listen to Today with Sean O'Rourke with the RTE Radio Player.
The number of people in mainland China now known to have died from the coronavirus outbreak has risen to over 560, with confirmed cases of the infection now over 28,000. Meanwhile, 2 Irish people are among the passengers who are quarantined on a luxury cruise ship off the coast of Japan after an outbreak of the virus. Over 2,500 passengers are confined to their cabins, and they'll be in quarantine for 2 weeks on the liner Diamond Princess. In a moment, I'll speak to Michael McGrail. He's a mailman living in Wuhan, where it all started. But first, I'm joined by Eoghan Corry, editor of Travel Extra. Eoghan, this liner was docked in the Japanese port of Yokohama. We know that 10 passengers tested positive for the virus. Tell me more about how it's being handled on board.
Oh, it's not pretty, Sean. It's a beautiful ship. It's a dream to go on a cruise across China and Japan. But when things go wrong, it turns into a prison. What happens is passengers are confined to their cabins, or to their staterooms, as the cruise lines call it. They have all the food and beverages brought to them. They're being supplied with free internet, phone calls, things like that would normally be an excess charge. But it does mean that you don't have access to the public spaces and the bars. The cruise industry is pretty good at this. They're used to having usually norovirus outbreaks. They happen maybe twice a year on major cruise ships, so they know how to react to it. Obviously, this is a much higher profile case because of coronavirus. And as you say, passengers from Australia, New Zealand, China, Taiwan and Japan have been affected.
Yeah, and of course, as well as passengers, 1,000 crew or so on board. Now, they presumably would be expected to work for the next 2 weeks to take care of the passengers.
The technology is quite impressive on this. What they use is like a gun that measures temperature of people's foreheads. So there crew moving around, things like that, people getting on board, loading, everything like that. That'll be very closely monitored. But it's a matter really of time and how quickly the health officials work on this, that they can give the all clear to those passengers who are not tested, who have not shown symptoms and are confined to their cabins. So that is there'll probably be a pressure on to expedite that process for the comfort of those on board.
Yeah, and of course there is the matter then of a huge vessel like this needing to empty its bilge, supplement its water supplies, also just the supplies of food and other provisions.
That's quite a sight to behold, but they're good at it. They're used to it. Some of these cruise ships are a town the size of New Ross floating around. The process of refilling just bringing on the food and all the necessities and all of that will be complicated a little bit by the checks. But as I say, the technology is impressive. That isn't the biggest issue facing the cruise line at the moment. The biggest issue facing cruise lines worldwide is a spate of cancellations and uncertainty. I was giving a history talk myself last night, and I had 3 or 4 people coming to ask me about future cruise bookings. That's the real damage to the travel industry in general, and the aviation industry, is the huge degree of uncertainty and a raft of cancellations and people wanting to know what their cancellation terms are. That's facing the cruise industry. There are 2 cruise ships, by the way, Sean, in quarantine. There's another one also, and there was one briefly detained in Europe last week. But I would expect these incidents to arise again and again as the high state of alert that we are picking up in the media. Anybody who reports with anything resembling coronavirus will cause these sort of major lockdowns.
Yeah, and also, speaking of transport, I see Hong Kong's flagship airline, Cathay Pacific, has asked staff to take 3 weeks of unpaid leave to help the airline cope with the impact of the coronavirus. Now, how is that likely to play out, and how will it impact on the airline?
Cathay have a fairly good experience of having got through a bigger crisis in the past, which was the SARS crisis. Back, some listeners will remember, back in 2003, their traffic fell by about 80%. They're talking about cutting by about 30% now. What tends to happen, and people will remember during the recession here, airline staff from British Airways and other airlines were asked to take unpaid leave. What tends to happen is they do get staff to take it. Cathay is very heavily unionised, though, so if they try to force staff to take unpaid leave, they could be facing further problems. The way the economy, obviously the scientists are doing what they can on their side for the disease, but the way people making major commercial decisions, and aviation is one of those industries very heavily hit, is looking at it, is they expect a peak sometime soon, around maybe next Saturday, February the 8th, and then to have a clearer idea of what's happening going ahead next week. The situation as regard Ireland is that we still have the Cathay Pacific route from Dublin to Hong Kong scheduled to start the end of March, and we still have the Juneyao flight to Beijing scheduled to start the end of March. But it is interesting, Sean, that Delta, most of the airlines the 30 airlines that have cancelled direct flights to China have pushed it to the end of February, some of them into March. Delta have now pushed it into April. It's really a matter of when we get some sort of handle from the medical people facing the crisis that it's reached a peak and is abating, and then airlines can start making decisions again. You can still get to Beijing with the Middle East carriers. They've cancelled the regional cities in China, and you can still use the Chinese carriers, but it isn't looking good, judging by the reaction by airlines and indeed by governments such as the United States, which have banned entry to people who've been in China over the past 14 days. So it isn't looking good for international travel from where we're sitting this morning.
We'll stay in touch with you, Eoghan. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. That's Eoghan Corry there, editor of Travel Extra. And now let's go to Wuhan, where, as I say, it all began, and to Michael McGrail, a Mayo man living in the city. Michael, you're there for quite a long time.
Yeah, that's right, Sean. I've been here for a little over 12 years.
And tell me about your life and work there in the city.
Well, I moved here 12 years ago. Now I actually work for the Chinese government here as an academic director for the province of which Wuhan is located in. And I've been at that position now for about two and a half years.
Right.
I've been working with them. Yeah.
And how are you dealing then, and how did you get to deal with or hear about and begin having to deal with the virus and the quarantine? How has it all unfolded for you, Michael?
Well, at the beginning of January, we heard, I suppose you could say rumours, we heard a few rumours through social media here in China that there was a slight viral outbreak. Nothing really to worry about. A couple of weeks after that, the government announced it, and we were assured by the government that everything was in hand, the numbers were steady, it was very controllable. Then 24 hours later, the whole city was quarantined. So it escalated very, very quickly.
And the information that you're getting, I mean, are you satisfied with the flow of it? Because whatever about now, there certainly was a feeling that the authorities could have been more forthcoming.
Yeah, at the beginning, definitely at the beginning, in a way it was mismanaged when it came to the information being put out to the citizens. But as it stands now, the information is very free-flowing. Every day we get updates. Every hour in the house here you have updates through CCTV, which is like the RTE of China. And you get also updates, regular updates from government APPs through social media in China. So as of now, the information is actually quite free-flowing, quite open. But at the very beginning, there was very little.
Yeah, how are you passing the time, Michael?
Cleaning. You know, when you get into a situation like this, a few things happen. And I thought it was just me, but we have a group chat here in China, and a lot of the other people are also experiencing this. A few things happen to you when you're put into quarantine in the house for 14 days. One thing that sets in is a slight depression through the repetitive nature of every day doing the exact same thing. The second thing that sets in is a slight OCD, because you do have to go outside sometimes to top up with supplies. And when you come home, you're so worried that you're carrying the virus into your house that you have to clean everything. You have to wash your clothes, take a shower, wash your hair, wash your hands in alcohol. Then you have to Dettol your whole house. So if you do go outside, it's not as simple as putting on clothes, washing, and heading outside. When you come home, you have to clean your whole house from top to bottom. You're worried about viruses in the air conditioner system. We were worried about bats and, viruses on the floor. So you have to clean. And that's really most of the day is spent wiping down the house, studying up on Chinese, and watching movies.
It doesn't sound like a very interesting way of passing your time for more than a couple of days if you wanted to just maybe catch up on sleep or something. But Michael, seriously though, I mean, would you not have been in a position to leave there like some other Irish citizens?
Yeah. We actually got offered an evac flight to leave, but the issue that I had with the evac flight was my wife is here, and my wife Chinese, so the Chinese government wouldn't allow her to leave to go home on the evac flight to Ireland. So it sort of came to a decision that logically I knew what was correct. Logically I should have gone on the flight, but in my heart I knew the best was to stay here with my wife and her family, and also my father is in Wuhan as well. So I decided to stay with my wife. Yeah.
Is your father just on holidays there, or is he living in Wuhan?
No, he moved back to Wuhan about 5 years ago. He's a professor here in the university, and he came to Wuhan about 5 years ago, and he's living in the same city I'm living in, but just a different borough.
Yeah. Now, are you able to meet up with them, or is it the case that because of the quarantine, you're basically in lockdown, public transport isn't running, no cars, that kind of thing?
Right, yeah. So what they done was, when they quarantined the city, first they just quarantined the city. Nobody in or out. That was okay for a few days, but then public transportation stopped working, and then they decided to shut down tunnels and bridges, which Wuhan is essentially 3 very big boroughs together. So essentially what they've done is they self-isolated each borough as well. So my father's in one borough, I'm in another. It's about a half an hour drive away, and I can't get to him, he can't get to me. We're all sort of cut off from each other.
And could he not have gone home? I mean, sorry, when I say home, back to Europe or back to Ireland?
Yeah. But he didn't want to leave me here. That was the problem. He didn't want to leave. I'm here, and my wife is here. And he felt that the situation here will get back in hand, because the government here is really on top of it. And they're very efficient in what they're doing, and they're very efficient in the way they're handling it at the moment. There's not much more that can be done, but whatever is that can be done, the Chinese government are far on top of it.
Yeah, and we're looking at pictures, obviously, of people, wearing face masks and that kind of thing. That is something you just simply have to do if you're venturing out.
Yeah, you have to wear face masks. Now it's law here. If you go outside without a face mask, if you go outside with no face mask, you're getting arrested. So the problem here is, you have to go outside and buy food, but in order to do so, you need to wear a face mask, and face masks here are worth their weight in gold. If you go to pharmacies, the shelves are cleared out in pharmacies that sell these face masks. They're very hard to buy, very hard to come across. So whatever you do have in your home, you have to guard, because you're going to need them,
Yeah, and what about the range of food then when you do venture out to buy stocks?
You know, it's very interesting being stuck in a city that's quarantined like this, because you witness the breakdown of society in such a way that you're only used to seeing on a movie. Like, I used to watch movies like Contagion and zombie movies and all these type of movies, and you could sort of see in these movies how society would break down. And I always considered that fiction, but I don't anymore. I've seen it firsthand of how society slowly breaks down in a situation like this in a city that's quarantined. There's mass panic buying going on. It's impossible to get fresh vegetables in Wuhan at the moment. And if you do have if there are fresh vegetables, you've got to be willing to maybe fight a little bit for it. You know, you have to move quickly. I've seen people here fighting over a carrot. It's not really a very good situation. And on top of that, on the early days of the quarantine, and not so much now, but in the early days, the supermarkets and the pharmacies took advantage a bit, and they decided to increase the price of food tenfold.
Yeah.
But now the government has came in and they've stabilised the pricing, and they've said that if any supermarket or pharmacy is caught in inflating food or rising the price of food, they'll be heavily fined. So that's not too bad now. The prices have stabilised. But really that doesn't matter, because there's very little food around the place to buy anyway.
Yeah, but Michael...
it's very difficult.
I'm just looking at a TV monitor here. The Chinese ambassador to the United Kingdom has been speaking in the last half hour or so, saying, look, the number of patients being cured is rising. I suppose if the number of people catching the virus is rising, the number of patients cured it would be expected to rise as well. But also he says they're fully confident of beating this virus. But when you talk about society breaking down, I mean, people might associate that with, looting, riots and that kind of thing. I mean, it's obviously not a normal situation we're in, but is it fair to describe it as a breakdown in society?
In a certain way, it would be. When I describe it as a breakdown in society, I mean, all manners are gone out the window now. There's no more waiting in line. Everyone wants to be first. Everyone will put themselves first in a situation like this. And it shows through daily activities outside. It shows in supermarkets, people arguing, short-tempered, shouting at one another. It shows in pharmacies, and just the daily life now. If I go to walk outside, people are scared of each other. If I'm walking down the street, people are scared of me. They're going to walk across the street to the other side of the street to keep away from me. So in that regard, yeah. But as for looting, rioting, everything like that, no. There hasn't been any of that happening so far. The police have been keeping a tight rule of law in that regard.
Well, look, Michael, very interesting to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed for talking to us. That's Michael McGrail there, Mayo man, originally from Westport in County Mayo, on the line there from Wuhan. We hear about Donald Trump escaping impeachment after this break.
Today with Sean O'Rourke on RTE Radio 1.